with hard work beginning this week to try to implement the 6-month interim nuclear deal just reached this weekend. But as talks begin on a longer-term comprehensive agreement, potential obstacles are starting to appear. And the ink on that agreement was not even dry before a very public disagreement arose between 2 of its 7 signatories. Governments of Iran and the United States openly disagreed on whether the new interim accord grants Iran the right to enrich uranium.
This right has been explicitly stipulated by this agreement, stressing that Iran will go on with its enrichment program. And for this reason, I announced to the Iranian nation that Iran's enrichment activities will proceed similar to the past, as in the past.
Let me be clear. This first step does not say that Iran has a right to enrichment. No matter what interpretive comments are made, it is not in this document. There is no right to enrich within the 4 corners of the NPT, and this document does not do that.
Since I took office, I've made clear my determination to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. As I've said many times, my strong preference is to resolve this issue peacefully, and we've extended the hand of diplomacy. Yet for many years, Iran's been unwilling to meet its obligations to the international community. So my administration worked with Congress, the United Nations Security Council, and countries around the world to impose unprecedented sanctions on the Iranian government. And we have pursued intensive diplomacy, bilaterally with the Iranians and together with our P5+1 partners, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Russia, and China, as well as the European Union. Today, that diplomacy opened up a new path toward a world that is more secure, a future in which we can verify that Iran's nuclear program is peaceful and that it cannot build a nuclear weapon. While today's announcement is just a first step, it achieves a great deal. For the first time in nearly a decade, we have halted the progress of the Iranian nuclear program, and key parts of the program will be rolled back. Iran has committed to halting certain levels of enrichment and neutralizing part of its stockpiles. Iran cannot use its next-generation centrifuges, which are used for enriching uranium. Iran cannot install or start up new centrifuges, and its production of centrifuges will be limited. Iran will halt work at its plutonium reactor, and new inspections will provide extensive access to Iran's nuclear facilities and allow the international community to verify whether Iran is keeping its commitments. These are substantial limitations which will help prevent Iran from building a nuclear weapon. Simply put, they cut off Iran's most likely paths to a bomb. Meanwhile, this first step will create time and space over the next 6 months for more negotiations to fully address our comprehensive concerns about the Iranian program. And because of this agreement, Iran cannot use negotiations as cover to advance its program. On our side, the United States and our friends and allies have agreed to provide Iran with modest relief while continuing to apply our toughest sanctions. We will refrain from imposing new sanctions, and we will allow the Iranian government access to a portion of the revenue that they have been denied through sanctions. But the broader architecture of sanctions will remain in place, and we will continue to enforce them vigorously. And if Iran does not fully meet its commitments during the 6-month phase, we will turn off the relief and ratchet up the pressure. Over the next 6 months, we will work to negotiate a comprehensive solution. We approach these negotiations with a basic understanding. Iran, like any nation, should be able to access peaceful nuclear energy. But because of its record of violating its obligations, Iran must accept strict limitations on its nuclear program that make it impossible to develop a nuclear weapon. In these negotiations, nothing will be agreed to unless everything is agreed to. The burden is on Iran to prove to the world that its nuclear program will be exclusively for peaceful purposes. That international unity is on display today. The world is united in support of our determination to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Iran must know that security and prosperity will never come through the pursuit of nuclear weapons. It must be reached through fully verifiable agreements that make Iran's pursuit of nuclear weapons impossible. As we go forward, the resolve of the United States will remain firm, as will our commitments to our friends and allies. As President and Commander-in-Chief, I will do what is necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. But I have a profound responsibility to try to resolve our differences peacefully, rather than rush towards conflict. Today we have a real opportunity to achieve a comprehensive, peaceful settlement, and I believe we must test it. The first step that we've taken today marks the most significant and tangible progress that we've made with Iran since I took office. And now we must use the months ahead to pursue a lasting and comprehensive settlement that would resolve an issue that has threatened our security and the security of our allies for decades. It won't be easy, and huge challenges remain ahead. But through strong and principled diplomacy, the United States of America will do our part on behalf of a world of greater peace, security, and cooperation among nations. Thank you.
At the United Nations General Assembly in September, President Obama asked me and our team to work with our partners in order to pursue a negotiated settlement or solution with respect to the international community's concerns about Iran's nuclear program. Last month, the P5+1 entered into a more accelerated negotiation after a number of years of meetings in various parts of the world and efforts to engage Iran in serious negotiations. The purpose of this is very simple: to require Iran to prove the peaceful nature of its nuclear program and to ensure that it cannot acquire a nuclear weapon. And the reason for this is very clear. The United Nations Security Council found that they were not in compliance with NPT or other IAEA and other standards, and obviously activities such as a secret multi-centrifuge mountain hideaway, which was being used for enrichment, raised many people's questions, which is why ultimately sanctions were put in place. Today, we are taking a serious step toward answering all of those important questions that have been raised through the United Nations Security Council, through the IAEA, and by individual countries. And we are taking those steps with an agreement that impedes the progress in a very dramatic way of Iran's principal enrichment facilities and parts of its program, and ensures that it cannot advance in a way that will threaten our friends in the region, threaten other countries, threaten the world. The fact is that if this first step leads to what is our ultimate goal, which is a comprehensive agreement, that will make the world safer. This first step, I want to emphasize, actually rolls back the program from where it is today, enlarges the breakout time, which would not have occurred unless this agreement existed. It will make our partners in the region safer. We have created the time and the space in order to be able to pursue a comprehensive agreement that would finish the work that President Obama began on the very first day in office, and that is to ensure that Iran does not obtain a nuclear weapon. President Obama worked intensively, and his administration worked intensively, before I even came in, when I was in the Congress and voted for sanctions. The President worked in order to put in place a significant sanctions regime, an unprecedented regime. and he worked with countries around the world in order to ensure broad participation and support for these sanctions. That has been essential to the success of these sanctions. And we believe that it is the sanctions that have brought us to this negotiation and ultimately to the more significant negotiation to follow for a comprehensive agreement. Make no mistakes, and I ask you, don't interpret that the sanctions were an end unto themselves. They weren't. The goal of the sanctions was always to have a negotiation. And that is precisely what is now taking place. And that negotiation's goal is to secure a strong and verifiable agreement that guarantees the peacefulness of Iran's nuclear program. For more than 4 years, the international community has been united in its willingness to negotiate in good faith. And we have been particularly crystal clear that we will do whatever is necessary in order to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. We have also said that we prefer a peaceful solution, a peaceful path for Iran to respond to the international community's concerns. And as a result of those efforts, we took the first step today to move down that path. The measures that we have committed to will remain in place for 6 months, and they will address the most urgent concerns about Iran's nuclear program. Since there have been many premature and even misleading reports, I want to clearly outline what this first step entails. First, it locks the most critical components of a nuclear program into place and impedes progress in those critical components in a way that actually rolls back the stockpile of enriched uranium and widens the length of time possible for breakout. That makes people safer. With daily access, we will gain daily access to key facilities. And that will enable us to determine more quickly and with greater certainty than ever before that Iran is complying. Here's how we do that. Iran has agreed to suspend all enrichment of uranium above 5%. Iran has agreed to dilute or convert its entire stockpile of 20% enriched uranium. So let me make clear what that means. That means that whereas Iran today has about 200 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium that could readily be enriched towards a nuclear weapon, in 6 months, Iran will have zero. Zero. Iran will not increase its stockpile of 3.5% lower enriched uranium over the next 6 months, and it will not construct additional enrichment facilities. Iran will not manufacture centrifuges beyond those that are broken and must be replaced. Very importantly, Iran will not commission or fuel the Arak reactor, A-R-A-K, reactor, an unfinished facility that, if it became operational, would provide Iran with an alternative plutonium path to a nuclear weapon. And to ensure that these commitments are met, Iran has agreed to submit its program to unprecedented monitoring. For the international community, this first step will provide the most far-reaching insight and view of Iran's nuclear program that the international community has ever had. This first step, let me be clear, this first step does not say that Iran has a right to enrichment. No matter what interpretive comments are made, it is not in this document. There is no right to enrich within the four corners of the NPT, and this document does not do that. Rather, the scope and role of Iran's enrichment, as is set forth in the language within this document, says that Iran's peaceful nuclear program is subject to a negotiation and to mutual agreement. And it can only be by mutual agreement that enrichment might or might not be able to be decided on in the course of negotiations. So what is on the other side of the ledger here? Again, there have been a number of premature reports and reactions, so I want to be clear about what this step provides, this first step, and what it doesn't provide. In return for the significant steps that Iran will take that I just listed, and there are more, incidentally, than I just listed, those are the principal, the international community will provide Iran with relief that is limited and perhaps most importantly, reversible. The main elements of this relief would hold Iran's oil sales steady and permit it to repatriate $4.2 billion from those sales. And that would otherwise be destined for an overseas account restricted by our sanctions. In addition, we will suspend certain sanctions on imports of gold and precious metals, Iran's auto sector, and Iran's petrochemical exports, potentially providing Iran with about $1.5 billion in additional export revenues. For the benefit of the Iranian people, we will also facilitate humanitarian transactions that are already allowed by U.S. law. No U.S. law will be changed. Nothing will have to be different. In fact, the sanctions laws specifically exempt humanitarian assistance. So this channel will not provide Iran to any new source of funds, but we will help them in order to try to provide the people of Iran with additional assistance. It simply improves access to goods that were never intended to be denied to the Iranian people. Now, I want to emphasize the core sanctions architecture that President Obama, together with allies and friends around the world, have put together. That core architecture remains firmly in place through these 6 months, including with respect to oil and financial services. Again, let me repeat, this is only the first step, but it is a first step that guarantees while you take the second step and move towards a comprehensive agreement, Iran's fundamentals of its program are not able to progress. Fordow, Natanz, Iraq, and other centrifuge and other things that matter. So that is a critical first step, and I will say to all of you that as we conclude this first round of negotiation with the beginning of the possibility of a much broader accomplishment down the road, it is our responsibility to be as firmly committed to diplomacy and as relentless in our resolve over the years as we have been to bring the concerted pressure that brought us to this moment.